PowerPC 4870x2 review. NVIDIA and ATI have been locked in competition, well, for a long time now. They perform a kind of leapfrog dance with one another. One takes the title of best performance to be jumped, and the other one taking the title for themselves. Well, it looked like, with NVIDIA's latest offerings, they held the title fairly well. But if you know a thing or two about history repeating itself, ATI has now taken back the title. The question is, how long till NVIDIA comes back on top? Well, we're not here to talk about that, we're here to talk about the 4870x2. The 4870x2 is up there in the pantheon of OMFG price video cards. This card isn't priced cheap, but it's priced cheaper than some other cards, with most prices hovering in the 600 area depending on where you buy or what special version the manufacturer you're getting it from is priced at. This card is about performance, not about the best bang for your buck though, so let's put that money plate where it belongs and talk specs and performance. If you compare the 4870x2 to other similar cards, i.e. its single GPU brother the 4870 with no X2 and NVIDIA's GTX 280, well, it's just beefier. It basically doubles the stats of a non-X2 4870 with 4 times the RAM. In other words, this card is a tank. Performance-wise, it likes to, perform well. Even with the ATI problem of not liking AA enabled in games, it hardly matters, as in only a few spots is the 4870x2 overcome by any other card. And it's got a little trick that the other kids in the block don't share. The higher the resolution, the faster this thing runs. Most of the benchmarks are comparable to other cards and sometimes just barely ahead. However, in certain games, this card does pull far ahead, like Crysis at an extreme resolution with all the goodies turned on. So just from looking at all the other benchmarks with lower resolutions, the 4870x2 may appear like it's not exactly top of the pack, as it's being overcome in some cases by the 98 GTX, or only ahead by a couple frame rates. But once you crank up the resolution, it becomes quite obvious just how powerful this thing is, as all its other competitors fall far behind the curve. This becomes a bit of a buying decision if you don't have a large resolution monitor though. Is the money really worth it if you're not going to be using this card to the full extent of its power? The only answer to that problem is, well, the 4870x2 is a high-performance card meant to run at high resolutions. If you're not going to be running your games at high resolutions, maybe you should look at less expensive cards than this, or any expensive card for that matter, because, well, you're just not going to be needing the power that something like this is going to give you. On the driver's side of things, while ATI hasn't been known in the past for making the best drivers for their cards, it's exactly that, a thing of the past. ATI's drivers before release are what we're using for the benchmarks in this review. That means ATI can only go up from here in driver performance for the card. You may be asking yourself, how does the card share its 2 GB of RAM between the two GPUs? Well, before the card was released, there was some speculation that it may be using the same technology that modern processors use. However, that's not true. Instead, the card has something called the sideport interface. It allows a GPU to contribute additional bandwidth to the PCI 2.0 bus if it becomes strained. The problem with this is that it's a feature that has to be utilized by software applications. In other words, developers have to program this into games, which means, as of right now, no game is going to take advantage of this feature and the increased performance it may or may not give you, and it'll have to become somewhat popular in the future for developers to really start using it. So while it's nice to know it's there, it still doesn't replace the way CPUs share their bandwidth and the benefits from that. I guess we just have to keep hoping that GPUs will do the same thing in the future. However, all is not lost. The card doesn't just have that sideport interface for sharing between the two GPUs. For anything that doesn't utilize that feature of the card, it uses the same thing the 3870x2 does, to share the memory between two GPUs. So while the sideport interface isn't being used in today's tech, that doesn't mean the card is banking on some new technology that no one is using yet. For performance as far as installation random issues is concerned, like any top-end card, well, aside from the batch of NVIDIA chipsets that recently came out, there's nothing wrong with it. Of course, you're going to want to make sure you have plenty of power and a good-sized case to install the card because it is just freaking massive. But when you're dealing with cards like this, that just comes as common sense. So as it stands, if you've been waiting to spend a lot of money to get the best possible performance of the time, well, you're in luck, because the 4870x2 is the best card out there, and it's not even that crazily priced either. With the card being in the $600 price range, well, you'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind, or an ignorant NVIDIA fanboy not to choose this card over the GTX 280. While you might want to look at some lower priced cards if you're not running those intense resolutions, that doesn't mean this is going to not work at lower resolutions. Basically, you're going to get an awesome card, but without the high resolution this baby loves, you might be wasting a little bit of money. Of course, you can always solve that problem by buying a bigger monitor, if you want to. Did I mention this thing is huge? And everyone knows what a big video card means. Big cases. And everyone knows what a big case means. Big desk?